All right, let's talk about something fascinating. We're going to dive into Turkey's really bold attempt to break free from the usual traps of the global financial system. It's a high-stakes game that very few countries have ever even tried to play. So let's see how they're pulling it off.
You know, for most mid-sized countries, it seems like there are only two choices in the global financial game. You can either comply with all the rules set by the big players, or you can defy them. But here's the thought. What if it's the trap itself? What if both roads lead to the exact same destination?
And this is exactly what we call the two-option trap. The idea is actually pretty simple. It doesn't matter if a country plays ball or rebels, the system is kind of designed to get something out of them either way. Let's look at a couple of real-world examples to see exactly how this plays out.
So on one hand, you've got Egypt. They chose to comply. They took the IMF loans, they floated their currency, they privatized assets, and what happened? They ended up with crushing debt and a structural dependency. Then, on the other hand, you have Turkey's first move, defiance. They bought Russian defense systems, ran their own military ops, and the result was a coordinated currency attack and some really punishing credit downgrades. So here's the crucial takeaway. It doesn't really seem to matter which door you pick. The system isn't set up to just reward the good guys and punish the bad guys. It's set up to extract. The compliant country and the defiant one both find themselves in a weaker position, with value just flowing out of their economies.
But here's where the story gets really interesting. After that punishment back in 2018, Turkey didn't just flip and start complying. Nope. It began to forge a brand new third path, one that the system really isn't designed to handle.
Which, of course, leads us to the billion-dollar question. If following the rules leads to ruin and breaking the rules also leads to ruin, is there any real escape? Is there another way out of that room?
And Turkey's answer was a resounding yes. Instead of just taking the hit, they actually studied the very mechanisms that were used against them, and they started building their own capabilities to make sure those vulnerabilities couldn't be exploited again.
This third path, it isn't simple. It's not just about compliance, and it's not just outright defiance. It's a really clever hybrid strategy. It's about diversification, using some fiery, defiant rhetoric for political cover, while at the same time making some very orthodox policy moves to stabilize the economy and build real, fundamental independence.
Okay, so what does this actually look like on the ground? Because this isn't just talk. Turkey's strategy is built on two very concrete pillars, both designed to crank up its economic sovereignty.
Pillar number one is creating a sovereign defense industry. This is huge for reducing foreign leverage. And pillar number two is forging new economic alliances, especially with the Gulf nations, to create brand new channels for capital and for trade.
So let's focus on that first pillar, because it is brilliant, the defense industry. This is a masterclass in turning a massive vulnerability into a strategic global strength. Just think about it. In 2018, Turkey's reliance on Western arms was a huge weak spot. All you had to do was cut off the parts, and you could ground their air force. But today, Turkey is a major defense exporter. You can't really use arms dependency as a chokehold on a country that builds its own advanced drones and then sells them to your own allies.
And this is not a small-time operation we're talking about. This is $8.5 billion in defense equipment exports to 37 different countries. That's not just a change, that is a fundamental structural shift from being a dependent buyer to being a sovereign producer.
Okay, now for that second pillar, the strategic pivot toward the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC nations. This whole move is about diversifying the country's financial relationships away from its traditional and sometimes problematic dependencies. See, Turkey's big vulnerability in 2018 was its reliance on Western capital. So by building these really deep economic ties with partners like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, it's creating alternative financial highways that completely bypass the institutions that attacked its currency before. I mean, when your Gulf partners need you for multi-billion-dollar projects, it gets a lot harder for others to discipline you financially.
So, while Turkey is building up these pillars, how is the old system reacting? Well, officially, the punishment is still on. But unofficially, the market is telling a very, very different story. It really is like Turkey is digging a tunnel while the guards are still watching the main doors.
The institutional machinery that created all that pressure back in 2018, well, it's still there. And officially, Turkey is still being held at what you might call a scar discount. The message is pretty clear. We remember what you did, and you're still in the penalty box.
Just look at the contrast here. On one side, you have all three major rating agencies holding Turkey below investment grade. That's the official punishment.
But on the other side, the market reality? Institutional ownership of Turkey's main ETF is up almost 10% in a single quarter.
So what does this tell us? It suggests that the investors who are actually putting their money on the line, the smart money, they're seeing a structural strengthening that the official ratings agencies are either unwilling or maybe unable to acknowledge just yet.
And there's more data to back this up. Recently, 25 large institutional investors opened brand new positions in Turkey, while only 19 closed theirs. The trend is obvious. More money is flowing in than is flowing out. It shows that old chokehold is loosening as the economy gets stronger. Which leaves us with this powerful metaphor, and it's a great way to think about this whole thing. In the global financial system, the prisoner who behaves and the prisoner who rebels, they often both just stay prisoners. Turkey is attempting to be something different. It is the prisoner who is tunneling, and that is a story worth watching.